Jim, you talked, oh, sorry, my name is Doug Lutz, Nova Chemicals. I think you guys have heard my name too much in the conference. Jim, you talked to us about factors that affect the decision to move towards a BYOD kind of policy. And I was wondering how your tool to evaluate the business case accounted for that improved productivity from a benefits perspective.
That works. Productivity is probably one of the most controversial areas of the business case, but the firms that are willing to accept productivity as part of the business case show a real large difference in terms of how it impacts the ultimate number. So for example, something as simple as boot time. For one of the companies we did, the boot time on a consumer device was around 2 minutes versus about 12 minutes on a corporate device. They took credit for that 10 minutes per day times 250 days a year. That gets to be a really big number for 50,000 employees. They would assume that employees would work about 2 extra hours a week, white-collar workers, at home and at night. So they were taking credit for an extra 2 hours of work time. This was from some survey data that they did. They took credit for that as well. Now, where things got sticky was when management said, well, gee, doesn't that mean we can eliminate some employees because you're getting more work out of the existing workforce? Don't we need less people? And so it gets controversial if you have to eliminate people to drive that into a really hard savings. But if you're willing to accept that as just a productivity gain, then the number actually can be quite large.
Just to piggyback on what Jim said, we see benefits in terms of customer intimacy and cycle time reduction. And if you're into those kinds of things, this has a big bang effect on it.
Does anybody else from the panel want to take a crack at that, or are we ready to move on? Any other questions? So I know that we've all seen a lot of technology change at this conference, and I always think about we've got a lot to learn. We're learning about our plants, our industries, our infrastructure. And this is really an open question to the board. Can you talk a little bit about training and how you roll out training programs to support a new initiative, like something like employees bringing in new devices?
Yeah, so we launch so many devices. So this is kind of as a provider of the technology. We launch as many devices as the marketplace will actually consume, and it's it's kind of bilaterally selfish. It's selfish from our standpoint because we have that repeat relationship with a customer every time a new device comes out with bells and whistles. And so we try very hard as the consumers come into the stores to buy these new pieces of technology. And for us, technology means smartphones and tablets primarily. We don't sell PCs. We did for a little bit, but we're pretty much done with that. We do training on the spot to make sure they know the basics on how to use it. So this is also driven, obviously, by the manufacturers. So a Samsung or an Apple, they don't make money unless you're buying new devices. And so they put out resources on their sites on how to use the devices. So if you go and, we were talking at the table at breakfast about the Samsung Note 3 that's going to be coming out with a better screen and everything. And I've told people that have asked me, do you think the Note's a good device? I said, it's a great device. Go on YouTube and look on how to use the stylus, though, right? A corporate entity is not going to create their own training program on how to use the stylus on a Samsung Galaxy Note. It's just not within their bag of expertise. But you can crowdsource training, right? So it's actually looking for training that people create and populate into the blogosphere or the internet or YouTube and taking advantage of what's for free, right? Don't recreate something that you don't have to pay for. And it's all out there because people think they're experts and they put enough out there to make you savvy enough to get through the day and actually use this technology for the next 9 months until you buy a new piece of technology, right? Average cycle time right now is 9 months. That's when everyone wants to refresh.
One example that we've seen for training is we have a history of doing a use and misuse of collaborative technologies guide going back to '99. And this was in the style of a Victorian etiquette guy that was a little bit cheeky, as the Brits would say. So, for example, we say in video conferencing, to appear natural, you must practice unnatural acts. And by that, I mean you have to have a bigger smile, and emotions are hard to convey necessarily over video, so you got to exaggerate. But we always wanted to be able to give better guidance, and one of the things we found recently is redoing this stuff that used to be a paper book with tabs on it as an HTML5 application was just enormously liberating. In particular, we wanted to ask the question, what kind of collaboration are you engaged in? You're trying to build something, you're trying to decide something, trying to sort of build a community, and then what do you want the technology to do? Is it just get more people involved, or better process, or better use of data? And if you answer those two questions, we can begin to give you some specific guidance. If anybody wants to play with it, it's publicly available at lef.csc.com/m. But I just mentioned the HTML5 part of it because you want things to run on really any device. And that's the best thing I've seen so far. It also works offline.
Peter, probably the best training example that I'm familiar with is a company that they did use off-the-shelf material, which was great. But at the end of the material, you had to pass a test. They called it their driver's license because they were subsidizing the move to BYOD. But before you could get your subsidy, you had to demonstrate you had the ability to take care of your own needs and make smart decisions about what technology you were buying. And the interesting thing is it got competitive. So people started to take the tests, and they'd put the score up in their credenza, and then the people around them would have to beat that score. And so they actually had a very positive, energetic result around training because of just the natural competitive juices started to flow in the organization.
Any other questions?
I'm Jason Coop from Schnitz Steel. I have a company iPhone. I also have a personal iPhone. And I can use both on my company's network, although it's being seen as this is a security flaw. I'm just wondering from panelists, specifically, what is the security issues? I mean, in terms of data. And other than my company shrinking the perimeter, are there other technologies out there that can be employed that would allow us to quickly mobilize and start to allow mobile devices? Because we're implementing technology that will allow us to create applications that we can input production data mobile. So we can give it to a forklift operator, he can put in a production weight instead of using, the radio, somebody writing it down. And would like to get this out. But IT is concerned about the security of this.
A couple thoughts on that. I think there's the security, and then also in the manufacturing environment, you want something that's intrinsically safe. If you're out there, we've dabbled with a couple things. One's not bring your own device, but actually taking a Panasonic Toughbook, staging this up so our construction teams can get out, and the productivity is incredible because we had construction managers going out and literally running with pieces of paper out into the field, marking things up, and spending hours driving back and forth and translating these documents. The trouble we get with getting something that's supported like this, with all the security patches, with everything else, is it's such a small percentage of what the IT offering is that IT has a problem with continuing to support something like that. So it's a bit of a give and take. But that had the intrinsically safe capability. And we are testing out some other devices as well. But the market, there's a limit to what we can find today.
Yeah, let me give you a little perspective, kind of two fronts. One is internal at AT&T. So we're about 260,000 employees, and certain groups have allowance for BYOD. And our CSO and their policies are really three things have to be implemented on the device for it to be allowed inside of the corporate network. One is password protection, which forces encryption on the device, right? So I'm an iOS guy. My iPhone, the minute I slide my company official SIM in it, it pushes a policy to me when I try to activate my email saying, hey, you have to accept this security profile and you have to enter an 8-digit PIN. Minimal requirement, right? So that forces the device, and it's an exchange policy, to be encrypted at rest, encrypted in transmission, and I have to accept the wipe ability of IT. If I violate any policy at any given time, and hopefully not by mistake, they can send my device a kill pill and just torpedo it, right? So those are the three things that AT&T requires: is password protection, encryption at rest, and remote wipe, right? Those are kind of foundational. Now, a lot of companies do that, and as we interface with companies and try to help coach them on what's the right policy for them, many companies are adding mobile device management on top of that. Mobile device management adds some additional security capabilities on it, but it also adds remote management capabilities, which is the big thing, to be able to blacklist application, blacklist websites, push applications that are approved, and gives you more of what you've always done for those corporate laptops as far as policy control, application control. It gives you that ability on these mobile devices. Now, the question most enterprises then ask is, well, if I push that to a device somebody paid for and brought to the company, am I not taking that device over entirely? And the answer is absolutely. You now own that device lock, stock, and barrel as an enterprise, even though somebody else bought it, and they may be paying for the data plan, right? So there's some challenges on how you manage those devices that are not yours as an enterprise, and you're not paying for them. If you send a kill pill and somebody has personal information on that device, what have you done to that personal information? Are you liable as an enterprise for destroying it? And the U.S. courts say absolutely you're liable. It doesn't matter what paperwork they sign, because there's these legal terms that are really in the favor of the consumer, and gross negligence is the term that we most commonly hear. If an IT department, without cause or provocation, deletes the account and the information on a device that's not owned by that company, they're liable for whatever monetary damage their employee can prove. And we've seen it, right? So then you get into this toggle environment, which is the product that we've created, but it's dual persona. And I talked about it a little bit, where you create an application that's more of a container. The enterprise owns that container and all the security protocols and the way it works and what information it can contain. And when you can actually create schedules, so at 8 o'clock you're allowed to get into your toggle account, at 5 o'clock it shuts down and it closes and everything is eliminated off the device. And you own only that toggle environment, that corporate environment inside that device. Everything else is only the consumer's information, right? So you can never actually impact it, and you can't share information across the two. They're segregated by, really a container firewall, right? And so dual persona and the ability to implement dual persona will allow true bring your own technology, right? And I say technology because I agree with these guys that it's not just smartphones and tablets, it's PCs. And where is that persona stored? Is it stored in a browser profile, so that as you browse in and you get your authentication squared, it then populates a virtual desktop or something of that nature? So I think these guys will agree that this is really an evolving and changing landscape on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, Owens Corning, of course, you're sitting next to one of my security guys over there, but we've evolved to the place where we allow guest access in our networks because we can segment it out. We have a particularly employee-based network, which is authentication-based for employee mobile devices as well. And those are what the infrastructure guys love to call the carpeted spaces of our plant. So, I had a funny story when I first heard that term. I said, well, can I carpet my plant and get everything everything that you got over there? So I think on a manufacturing shop floor, it's a little bit more of a tricky situation, because having wireless on the manufacturing shop floor has a lot of difficulties, particularly in terms of interference, electromagnetic, a lot of steel, a lot of structure, and then you have, we don't have the same necessarily issue as having to be fireproof and explosion proof, because we don't have those kinds of processes really in our company. So we're working right now towards that direction on the shop floor, is how do we work up the security profile, the network profile to enable this, because that'll really enable what I talked about also as well, is that expertise mobile video conferencing on our shop floor as well, which we think has high value for us going forward. So but I mean, I think everything that Dan just said is important in the overall grand scheme of things. What I look about, my biggest concern from a security standpoint on a mobile device is really I think what you guys called the what I call data in motion, right? And securing that data element in motion, because I'm concerned about IP moving back and forth across the frontier, and and there's not necessarily a great solution for that right now today. So we use policy, we use training, we use education, and we use some technology to try to monitor that border frontier, particularly with IP. But it's a difficult situation there, and there's a lot of trust still in that overall process.
I just want to comment on the issue of data, because we tend to treat all data the same. And if we treat all data the same and some is really sensitive, then we really have a lot of work to do. But in fact, there's a growing move towards transparency, sharing data with your partners, sharing data with your customers. And if we go through and code the data in terms of what's really sensitive and what's not, we can simplify matters, because for the stuff that's not so sensitive, it doesn't matter so much, so we don't need to be quite so concerned. To echo Dan's point, think about how most of the systems you're going to build in the future are probably going to be used by partners and customers, and not just yourself. So if that's true, then how would you build it? Put yourself in the mind of a customer, and if you say to a customer, I have this great app, it just needs to take over control of your personally owned machine. That's a no. That's a big no. But to his point, if you create a container and say, we're going to share this chunk of disk, we're going to encrypt it, there's a little bit of a problem of making applications run inside the container. That gets a little complicated. But we think that's really the right way to go. The other thing is just to loop back on the data side. If you remember the picture of PCs being outside the firewall, one of the big bangs of that is collaboration with anybody, anywhere. And the reason that's important is that we know that breakthrough ideas don't typically come from groups that are just inside that know each other really well. You got to have some outside spark. Now, when you reach that person outside who's probably from a different company, why should they work with you? So you're going to have to bring some IP to the table. So we can't just say IT is something we hold closely. We're going to have to figure out which IP we can afford to share. And also, it's my observation that some of the IP gets overtaken by events, goes bad, if you will. So, how do we exploit this stuff before it goes bad?
Just one question I was thinking of during the presentations. When I took my job for ARC, I'm a staff employee, but not everybody has the same type of a work environment as I do. Can anybody in the panel talk about differences and implications on hourly paid workers versus staff employees?
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a topic for us as we look at the bring your own device policy. Of course, we've got a company paid program for higher level jobs, but we are currently only offering personal mobile device for salaried workers, because there gets to be a real implication whether you are requiring or not people to be doing the work in the evening. If I'm at home and I'm looking at my BlackBerry and I'm a person of a job class that could be charging overtime, we've got the capability that those people could be coming back and looking for additional pay for that. So because of those HR and legal implications, we've run this through our department. We only have chosen to offer this for salaried employees.
I'll tell you that we have 100,000, I don't know, these guys can correct me, 120,000 hourly union employees. They are not allowed to use their devices off hours, period. It's grounds for reprimand and, if repeat, termination. We with the unions we have to work with, and you guys probably, if you read the news, every 3 years we have to go through contract negotiations with these guys, and they're not going to get permission to use, no matter how much lift in productivity. We don't want to fight the union on wages owed based on answering an email at 10 at night when your shift ended at 5. It's just not worth it for us. So we build it into their union agreements that when their shift ends, they can't be, they have a pager, so they can be paged and called up and paid overtime, but just for the heck of answering an email, they're not allowed to.
So, yeah, at Owens Corning, we don't have a specific policy against hourly workers having employee-owned device, but It all requires approvals up through several levels of management, even for a non-stipend device. So usually you work with your manager first on whether you should do this or not, and if that approves, it actually comes up to what we call one of our members of our operating committee, which is one of the general managers of our business segments, for them to approve that. And so at this point, it's not a big concern about ours, but I don't think we're seeing a lot of requests either coming from our hourly employees.
Jim or Doug, any comments on that from your experience?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Jim and I felt for a long time, with respect to at least knowledge workers, let's set the union aside, that people are starting to realize they compete for their jobs on a global basis now. There's somebody in another country who'd really be happy to do my job. And so if I want to spend my money on stuff to do my job for you better, and you say no, I think that's immoral.